The train screamed like something alive as it pulled into Tierra Quemada, its whistle splitting the late afternoon heat. Wind stirred the dust into ghosts along the tracks. Heat waves shimmered over the barren horizon, broken only by mesquite trees and the collapsed ribs of old wooden fences. The station stood at the edge of everything, a lean-to shack of bleached boards and a crooked sign barely holding on. Isabel Cordero stepped down from the last car with nothing but a small suitcase, worn boots, and the kind of stillness that grief carves deep into a person. Her gray traveling dress clung to her from the sweat and the long ride from Santa Fe. Her face was lined from too many years of pretending not to feel anything. She adjusted her wide-brimmed straw hat and looked around the dead platform. No one waited for her. No one ever would. But someone had been left behind. 5 children stood in a line just beyond the freight car, silent, dusty, and wrong, in a way that made her stomach clench. The oldest, a boy on the cusp of adolescence, maybe 12, stood like stone, clutching the hand of a little girl who swayed where she stood, eyes half closed. Behind him, 2 identical boys huddled together, and a girl, maybe 6, stared down at the wooden slats holding a headless rag doll so tightly the seams strained. Nobody claimed them. Nobody spoke to them. Passengers passed by like they were stray dogs. One woman lifted her skirts and whispered to her husband, "They smell like coal and sickness." Don Gaspar, the station master, spit tobacco into the dust and scratched his stomach beneath his vest. They got dumped off from Las Piedras. Folks say their pa died in the mine collapse. No ma, just showed up. Ain't my responsibility. And you just let them stay? Isabel asked, her voice calm and quiet. But inside she was trembling. Don Gaspar shrugged. Where they gonna go? Ain't no orphanage here. Trainman said to put 'em off, so I did. Not my place to feed 'em. The little girl swayed again, coughed a dry, tearing sound that echoed louder than the train whistle. Isabel turned sharply toward her. Her knees moved before her mind did. Are you all right, Nina? She asked, crouching beside her. The boy, oldest protector, stepped between them. His jaw was tight, his eyes black with warning. Don't touch her. Isabel didn't flinch. She has a fever. She needs water. Where are your things? No things, he said. They left us. All of them. His silence was answer enough, the ragdoll girl whispered. We slept by the coal pile last night. Isabel stood slowly looking over the 5 small bodies. Clothes, ripped shoes, torn, no bags, no food. She looked back at the train where the conductor shouted, all aboard. No one glanced at the children. The steel wheels groaned. The train began to roll. She could still leave. She had come here chasing maybe an aunt, who might be dead, a house that might be gone. She could get back on the train. Leave them. Walk away. But she didn't. Instead, she took her handkerchief from her sleeve and wiped the sweat from the little girl's forehead. What's her name? She asked the boy. Marisol. She's burning. We're fine, he said, voice flat, but his eyes betrayed him. What's your name? Isabel asked more gently. Diego. All right, Diego, she said. I'm going to help her. You don't have to like it, but I'm doing it anyway. He didn't nod, but he didn't stop her when she took Marisol's other hand. It was small and frighteningly light. Isabel held it carefully like it might break. She led them toward the shade of the station's overhang. Heat rippled through the air. Marisol stumbled once, and Isabel scooped her up without thinking. The girl's skin was dry, her breath shallow. Isabel's heart thudded faster. Don Gaspar watched from his stool. You taking them now? Ain't like they got folks. She needs water. They all do. He grunted and turned his eyes away. Isabel lowered herself to the ground in the shade with Marisol in her arms. The boys sat stiffly nearby. The little girl with the doll sat cross-legged beside Isabel, eyes locked on Marisol's flushed face. "She's hot," said the doll girl. "I know," Isabel said softly. "What's your name, Anna?" "Well, Anna, I'm Isabel. I'm not from here either." Anna looked up at her hair in wild tangles around her face. "You smell like roses." Isabel blinked. She hadn't worn perfume in months. Maybe the last of her hand soap. The twins didn't speak. One of them picked at a scab on his knee. The other had dried blood on his shirt collar. They looked half feral, like animals that had been kicked too many times. "Do you have a place to go?" Isabel asked Diego. He said nothing. Isabel sighed. Marisol's breathing was too fast. The child needed a bath shade and honey tea, maybe mint to help her lungs. All things she didn't have. Her mouth was dry. Her hands trembled with something that felt too much like memory of blood on sheets of empty cribs, of nights staring at ceilings, begging for a different body. "I'll take you somewhere safe," she said finally. "If there is such a place in this place." "You don't know us," Diego said sharply. "No," she said, meeting his eyes. "But I know what it's like to be left behind." The late sun dropped lower, stretching long shadows across the empty platform. Isabel looked toward the chapel down the road. Maybe the priest had water. Maybe a floor they could sleep on. Maybe not. But it was better than dirt and waiting to die. "Come on," she said. "We need to find help before the sun goes down." She stood still holding Marisol and began walking. Behind her, Diego rose silent as a shadow and followed. Anna stood cradling her headless doll. The twins trailed without speaking, dust clinging to their bare ankles. At the end of the platform, Isabel turned to glance back. The train was gone. Only the heat remained. And 5 children walked with her now, into the nothing, into the unknown. "I buried 3 children before they ever breathed. Don't ask me if I know how to be a mother." The chapel's wooden door groaned as Isabel pushed it open with her shoulder. Dust swirled in the heavy air, curling into golden ribbons in the fading sunlight. Inside the room was cool and shadowed the air thick with wax and silence. Marisol lay limp against her chest, her small face flushed and glistening with fever sweat. She took a step forward, then another. Her arms trembled under the weight of the child, but she didn't stop. Behind her, the other 4 children hesitated at the doorway, eyes wide and uncertain, their feet hovering at the threshold, as if crossing into a holy space might brand them. A figure moved from the shadows to her right. The priest, Padre Esteban, emerged from the apse robes gathered in one hand, a worn Bible in the other. "You're not from here," he said. Voice even unreadable, "No." Isabel replied, her voice rough from thirst and dust. "But I need your help." He looked at her, then past her to the children at the door, and his expression flickered. "I'm not running a shelter. I'm not asking for that. Just water, a place out of the sun. The girl's burning with fever." Padre Esteban looked down at Marisol, at her flushed cheeks and damp hair clinging to her forehead. He sighed, then motioned toward a side door. "There's a storeroom out back. It's dry. Not much else." "Thank you," Isabel said, though her throat ached with resentment. She didn't expect warmth, but it stung all the same how quickly people drew lines between themselves and suffering. He led them around the side of the chapel to a lean-to addition with a slanted roof and a warped door. Inside, crates of candle wax and folded linens lined the walls. It smelled of wood dust and old rain. Isabel laid Marisol down on a stack of folded burlap sacks. The girl moaned softly, her small fists twitching. "Water?" Isabel asked, turning to the priest. "There's a well out back." You'll need to draw it yourself. Of course. He looked at her for a long moment, then at the children who hovered like birds, too afraid to land. Padre, she said quietly, her voice low-controlled. If there's any honey, or herbs, mint or willow bark, there's some in the pantry. I'll fetch what I can. He left without another word. Isabel dropped to her knees beside Marisol. Her own body ached back, stiff arms shaking, mouth dry. She pressed a hand to the child's forehead. Still too hot. She peeled off her own shawl and folded it beneath the girl's head. Stay with me, pequeña, she murmured. Don't leave me yet. She didn't realize the others had crept in until she felt a hand brush her sleeve. Ana sat cross-legged nearby, the headless doll perched beside her. One of the twins, Luis, maybe had curled up on a pile of cloth, already drifting to sleep. Diego stood near the door, arms folded, shoulders squared like a soldier. Watching. Always watching. You said you're not from here, he said. I'm not. Then why'd you help us? Isabel dipped a rag into a bowl of water the priest had left before vanishing again, and began dabbing Marisol's face. Because I've lost things too. Diego didn't answer right away. His face was stone, but his eyes flickered just once. Are you her mother now? No, Isabel said, then softer. But I'll stay with her until she doesn't need me. That's what matters. He didn't reply, but he stepped a little closer, and that was something. By nightfall, the room was still. Isabel sat awake, her back against the wall, watching the children sleep. Marisol's fever had eased slightly, but her breathing remained shallow. The twins slept curled together like pups. Ana snored softly, clutching her doll. Diego lay awake across the room, eyes on the ceiling, body still. Isabel let her head tilt back, and for the first time in months, she prayed. Not the kind she used to whisper in church, but the kind that came from dirt and blood and aching bones. Let her stay, she whispered. Let this child stay. A creak outside made her eyes snap open. A silhouette passed the window, old bent. She stood quickly, heart pounding. She opened the door to find an old woman in a shawl setting down a small bundle. She didn't speak, just placed it gently on the ground and stepped back into the darkness. Isabel stared after her. Wait. But the woman was already gone, swallowed by shadow. She looked down. Inside the bundle, dried herbs, a small clay jar of honey, and 2 strips of clean linen. Marisol stirred behind her. By morning, the girl was breathing easier. Diego sat beside her legs, crossed his head, bent close. Isabel watched from the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. You're still here, he said without turning. I said I would be. He nodded slowly. She looks better. Isabel crouched beside him. It's not over yet. The room smelled like honey and warm dust. Isabel poured water into tin mugs and handed one to each child. Luis and Leon drank greedily. Ana sipped carefully, watching her the whole time. Outside, the bell rang for morning mass. Isabel turned to Diego. Is there anyone? Family, anyone at all? He shook his head. My uncle worked in the mine. He's gone too. What about the house? Gone with it. Everything was rented. They tossed us out the next day. She wanted to ask more, but he stiffened. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a threadbare scarf. She tore it down the middle, handed one half to Luis and the other to Leon. Let's clean your faces. They didn't speak, but let her do it. Small victories. Padre Esteban returned late that afternoon with news. I asked around. The only relative of yours, your Aunt Soledad, died 2 years ago. Her house still stands. No one's touched it since. Isabel's chest tightened. Where is it? End of Arroyo Street, past the dry wash. Adobe house. Cracked but standing. She stood. "We'll go." Padre Esteban looked at her. "You plan to stay?" Isabel looked around at the 5 children, at Marisol now sitting up pale but awake, at Ana with her doll, Diego standing with his hands balled at his sides like he didn't know what to do without a fight. "Yes," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." The priest hesitated. "You'll need permission from the mayor to stay on the land." She stared him down. "Then I'll ask." Outside, the wind picked up warm and full of dust. The sun had begun to sink behind the jagged hills, casting long shadows across the chapel yard. Isabel turned back to the children. "Pack what you can," she said, though none of them had anything to pack. She looked down at Marisol, who reached for her hand. "Can I walk?" Isabel helped her to her feet. "We're going to find our home," she whispered, and with that they stepped out into the light, toward whatever waited at the edge of the dry arroyo. In this town, charity is a weakness, and pity is a price. Keep your head down and your hands busy. The sun hung low and mean when they reached the end of Arroyo Street, the wind sharp with grit and dry as bone. The road narrowed to a dusty path, edged by thornbrush and half-dead cactus. Isabel walked in silence, her shawl pulled tight, eyes fixed on the crooked house ahead. It slouched to one side like it had given up long ago. The adobe walls were cracked and peeling, half-covered in climbing weeds. The roof sagged. A shutter banged in the wind, rhythmic and hollow. Soledad's house. Diego said nothing, but Isabel could feel him watching her. Marisol leaned against her hip with the weariness of a child who'd been sick for too long. Ana clutched her headless doll. The twins lagged behind, too tired to pretend they weren't afraid. Isabel stepped onto the porch, if it could still be called that. A single plank cracked beneath her boot. She pushed open the door. It gave with a groan and a burst of trapped heat. Inside, dust lay thick over everything. A table with one leg splinted in rope, a stove rusted around the base shelves of clay pots coated in cobwebs. Mice had nested in the corners, but the walls still stood, and the floor was dry. She set Marisol down on a bench by the door. "This was your aunt's?" Diego asked, peering around. "She raised my mother here." Ana wandered in behind him and dropped to her knees, tracing a faded tile on the floor with her finger. "It smells like rain that never came." The others didn't speak. They were too tired to complain, too used to worse. Isabel walked through each room. 2 small bedrooms, one nearly empty, the other full of old trunks and dried herbs hanging from the beams. She opened a chest and found a wool blanket that smelled of dust and rose water. Underneath, folded linens, hand-stitched with tiny initials, S.M. Soledad Montero. The name burned in her chest. She had no memories of the woman, only a few letters tucked away in her mother's sewing box. Her aunt had written once a year, never expecting a reply. And now here Isabel stood knee-deep in her silence. She returned to the main room and opened the windows one by one. Hot air rushed in. She looked over the children. "It's not much," she said, "but it's ours." Luis murmured something to Leon, and the 2 of them began moving the old table into the corner. Diego eyed a broom near the stove, then picked it up without being told. He began sweeping slow at first, then with more purpose. Isabel crouched by Marisol and tucked the wool blanket around her shoulders. "Are we staying?" the girl asked. "Yes." Forever, Isabel brushed the hair from her face. "As long as we can." They spent the rest of the evening in motion. Dust clouds rose with each sweep of the broom. The boys cleared broken boards and dead branches from the back step. Ana found a rusted pail and fetched water from the old pump. It ran slow and cold, and she laughed when it splashed over her sandals. Isabel found old oil lamps in a cupboard. She cleaned the glass with a torn sheet and poured the last of her lamp oil into one. The flame flickered to life, just as the sun sank. They ate what little they had left, 2 cornmeal cakes, a few apples from the chapel, and a tin of beans the priest had slipped her that morning. Afterward, Isabel stepped outside and stood alone in the dusk. The land was quiet, more so than she remembered. The only sounds were the creak of the house settling and the faint laughter of the twins inside. Coyotes would come out soon. She could feel them in the dark. Footsteps approached behind her. "Diego." "They think you're a saint," he said. "I'm not." He leaned against the porch post. "You're the only person who didn't look away." Isabel sighed, folding her arms. "I had 3 pregnancies," she said after a moment. "None of them made it past the 2nd trimester. One never even had a heartbeat." Diego stared ahead, not interrupting. "My husband left after the 3rd, told me a woman who couldn't have children wasn't worth a damn. And I believed him for a long time." She looked at him. "So no, I don't know how to be a mother. But I know how to hold on when everything in you wants to give up." Diego didn't speak. The crickets started up in the grass. Then he said quietly, "That sounds like something a mother would say." They stood there a moment longer before he turned back inside. Isabel followed soon after. That night they slept in corners and on blankets spread over the floor. Isabel stayed awake, listening to the rise and fall of 5 small chests. She felt the ache in her arms, in her ribs, in the hollow space that had lived beneath her heart for years. But for the first time, the ache felt useful. She rose early before the others stirred and stepped outside into the blue-pink hush of dawn. The dirt path still held the coolness of night. She walked to the edge of the arroyo and stared out over the hills. In the quiet, she thought of Soledad's letters, of how the woman must have lived here alone, stubborn, ignored by the town like a weed that wouldn't die. Isabel inhaled deeply. The air smelled of dust and chamomile. When she turned to head back, she saw someone standing near the fence, a figure wrapped in a dark shawl. The old woman from the night before. Isabel walked slowly toward her. The woman didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood beside the broken post, her weathered face unreadable. "You left herbs at the chapel." The woman nodded once. "You're Ramona, aren't you?" Still no words. But the name felt right. She had the face of someone who knew too much and shared too little. "Thank you," Isabel said. Ramona tilted her head. "You staying, I'm trying. Then keep the land clean and the fire warm. This place remembers who lives here." Isabel blinked, but the woman had already turned away and was walking back down the path, feet silent on the dirt. When Isabel returned to the house, the children were awake and waiting. Marisol was sitting up, eyes clearer. The twins were whispering over a pile of sticks. Anna had drawn something in the dust. With a bit of charcoal, 2 people holding hands under a roof with smoke curling from the chimney. Isabel paused at the door, feeling something shift deep inside her, like the air after a rain that hasn't come yet but will. There was work to do. The roof needed patching. They'd need food money approval from the mayor just to stay. But none of that changed the fact that the sun had risen on all 6 of them, still breathing, still together. She stepped inside and clapped her hands once. "Let's get to work," she said. "This place won't clean itself. The law doesn't care who you love. It only counts blood contracts and who has power." The hammering came just after sunrise, hard and impatient against the warped wood of the front door. Isabel paused mid-sweep, the broom bristling with dust and bits of straw. Marisol and Anna looked up from the corner where they were arranging washed stones into shapes on the floor. The twins froze at the table. Diego moved first, stepping toward the door. "No," Isabel said, wiping her hands on her skirt. "I'll get it." She opened the door to find a man in a long coat, too fine for this part of town, holding a leather satchel and a folded paper in one gloved hand. Behind him stood a boy not much older than Diego, shifting from foot to foot, holding a clipboard and avoiding eye contact. "Señora Isabel Cordero, I am. I'm with the mayor's office." The man didn't offer a name. He unfolded the letter with the flair of someone who enjoyed the ritual. "This is an official notice from Mayor Julian Rios. It concerns the presence of 5 undocumented minors residing under your roof." Isabel took the paper eyes, scanning the words, though the heat rising in her neck made them blur. The language was polite, almost kind. Beneath it lay a knife. Due to the lack of formal guardianship or legal adoption, the minors are to be considered wards of the territory, the man continued. Unless proof of kinship or custodial authority can be provided, the children will be transferred into care. Transferred to where she snapped. Santa Fe. There's a facility. Isabel laughed short and sharp. "You mean an orphanage that smells like bleach and locks the doors at night?" The man gave a small, infuriating smile. "The mayor is willing to delay action for 90 days. If during that time you can present documentation or meet territorial standards for guardianship, the case will be reconsidered." "And if I don't?" He folded the letter again. "Then the children are removed, permanently." She didn't slam the door, but she wanted to. Inside, the house felt colder. Marisol stared at her, eyes wide. Ana held her doll to her chest with both arms. Diego didn't ask. He just waited. "They want to take you away," Isabel said finally. "They say I don't have the right," Leon whispered. "Why? Because I'm not your mother," she answered. "Not by blood, not by paper, and that's all they care about." Diego stepped forward. "So what do we do?" Isabel didn't answer. Not yet. That night she walked the edges of the property, as if answers might grow from the soil. The stars above Tierra Quemada burned like frostbite. Coyotes yipped somewhere in the hills. She leaned against a post in the fence line, arms folded, trying not to shake. She hadn't come here to become anyone's savior. She'd come because she had nowhere else to go, because she was tired of being nobody to everyone. But the second she saw Marisol on that platform, glassy-eyed and too quiet, something had cracked open. She couldn't lose them now. Not any of them. A sound behind her. Footsteps. Ramona, the older woman, stood silent in the dark, hands wrapped in her shawl. "They came," Isabel said, not looking at her. "The mayor's office. They're giving me 3 months. Ramona grunted softly. "That's generous. Usually they just take." "Generosity has a price." Ramona didn't deny it. "I'm not married," Isabel said. "I have no legal right to these children. I'm not even sure this land's mine." The old woman shifted her weight. "It was your aunt's. That makes it yours. In the eyes of people who still remember what blood means. I need more than memory." "Then get yourself a man." Isabel laughed bitterly. "That's your advice. It's the law's advice." Ramona's voice was dry as mesquite bark. "A man with land, a roof, and a name in the books, that's what they respect. I don't want a man. You don't have to want him. You have to survive." They stood in silence, the wind whispering across the dirt. "Even now," Isabel said quietly, "we can't exist without a man's permission." Ramona turned her face to the stars. "This land belonged to women before it belonged to law. Don't forget that." The next morning, Isabel went to the chapel. Padre Esteban was in the garden behind it, planting onions in the hard-packed soil. He looked up at the sound of her boots crunching gravel. "I need to ask you something," she said. He brushed dirt from his hands. I heard the mayor sent someone. He gave me 90 days. He nodded. That's more than I expected. I need a copy of Soledad's deed. Proof the house was passed to me. He straightened up. We'll find it. I have her name in the records. There's something else. He tilted his head. What if she said slowly, I had a husband? Esteban's eyes narrowed. Do you know? He waited. But if I did, she went on, would that make the difference? He exhaled slowly. A married woman has more standing. The law assumes a man can provide structure, legitimacy. She almost laughed. Even if the man's a drunk or a ghost, and the woman's already doing everything, yes. Isabel looked down at her hands. The skin beneath her fingernails was cracked from scrubbing the walls the day before. Her knuckles were scraped from pulling nails out of old boards. I'm not asking you to lie, she said. I know, he replied. But you'd need a man willing to marry you. Fast, quietly. She nodded already, thinking of the man by the river. Tomas Ortega. He'd been in town twice since she arrived. Tall, weathered gray at the temples. A rancher without much left. Kept to himself. Widowed. No children. He'd watched her once in the market. Not cruelly, not kindly either. Just watched. Would it be enough, she asked. If the marriage is legal, and if he allows his name on the guardianship, it would stop the removal. The words tasted like gravel. I'll find him, she said. As she walked back down the hill toward the house, the heat already rising, Isabel saw the children from a distance, Ana chasing a chicken through the yard. Diego setting traps by the arroyo, the twins turning scrap wood into something that resembled a bench. They had already begun calling this place home. She couldn't let anyone take it from them. Marisol met her at the front door, barefoot, and smiling faintly. Where did you go to ask a question? Isabel replied. Did you find the answer? Isabel looked down at her and gently brushed the hair from her brow. I found part of it. She stepped into the house, heart steadying like hooves before a storm, and started thinking about what she would say when she stood face to face with the man who might be the key to everything. And nothing like what she wanted. I don't need love, Tomas. I need time protection and a signature that saves 5 lives. The Ortega Ranch lay just beyond the ridgeline, where the dust thinned and the grass grew yellow and stiff like dry brushes of wire. Isabel walked with her shawl wrapped tightly around her, not against the wind, but the fear crawling in her belly. The road stretched empty in both directions, and every step she took felt too loud. She'd only seen Tomas Ortega once up close at the market 2 weeks back. He hadn't smiled, hadn't spoken much. But there was something in the way he stood straight, still a man used to being alone, but not crushed by it. That was enough. It had to be. The gate to his property was chained but not locked. She let herself in, ignoring the ache of trespassing. A few goats milled around the barn, and the main house stood like a lone soldier, weather-beaten, scarred, and upright. She found him behind the barn, splitting logs with a wide axe. His shirt was damp at the back. He worked with rhythm, each strike steady and exact. When he noticed her, he didn't stop. Just wiped his brow with his sleeve and said, "Don't get many visitors out here." "I didn't come to visit," she said. He raised an eyebrow but didn't reply. "I'm Isabel Cordero," she added. "You saw me in town. I remember. I have 5 children living under my roof who aren't mine by blood. I have 90 days before they're taken away." That got him. The axe paused mid-air. "I'm not asking you to raise them," she continued. "I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for a husband in any real sense of the word." He lowered the axe and leaned on the handle. So what are you asking? I need a legal marriage. In name only. Your name on a piece of paper attached to mine. It gives me the right to keep them. That's all. He studied her. Slowly. Thoroughly. She held his gaze. You said 5 yes, yours no. You loved them. Her throat tightened. Yes. He looked off toward the hills. The silence stretched. Tomas Ortega was not a man who filled empty air with noise. He let things settle, and Isabel for once didn't rush to fill it either. He finally said, "What's in it for me? I won't ask you for anything. Not a bed, not a dime. You live your life. I live mine. You don't want neighbors, I won't bring them. You want quiet, I'll keep it. I already have quiet. Then this won't disturb it." He walked over to a stump and sat arms draped across his knees. "I lost my wife 7 years ago," he said. "Fever took her in spring. Took the baby with her. Girl never got a name. Just a grave out past the orchard. I'm sorry." He looked up, something unreadable in his expression. "I'm not asking for pity. I'm not offering it." He nodded as if that answer satisfied him. They sat like that a long while, her standing, him seated, the wind stirring dust between them. 3 months, he asked finally. "Yes. And after, if the courts approve me, we annul it. Or not. You choose. You afraid I'll take something from you? I've already had everything taken. There's nothing left to steal." He leaned back, jaw working. Then stood. "Come back tomorrow. I'll be shaved and wearing a clean shirt." She blinked. "That's a yes. I said I'd be clean. Didn't say I'd smile." That night she didn't sleep. She lay awake on the floor near the hearth, while the children slept in their patchwork nests around her. The house was warm, the fire low, the smell of burnt wood comforting in a way she didn't expect. She watched the shadows dance across the ceiling and wondered what kind of man agreed to something like this. A tired man, maybe. Or a man who had once known what it meant to hold someone who could not stay. The morning was already hot by the time she arrived at the chapel. Tomas was waiting, true to his word, clean shirt, shaved chin, and a look that said he wasn't about to change his mind. Padre Esteban kept it short. The vows were spoken without poetry. No flowers, no music, just words dry and legal binding them together in the eyes of the law. The children waited outside, dressed in their cleanest clothes, which wasn't saying much. Ana held Marisol's hand. Diego stood stiff as a soldier. The twins leaned on each other, mirroring Tomas's silence. When Isabel stepped outside, Ana whispered, "You look like a teacher." Isabel smiled faintly. "That's not a bad thing." Tomas didn't linger. "I'll have papers drawn up," he said. "Name transfer, land inclusion. You'll get copies." "Thank you." He tipped his hat. "You'll hear from me when it's done." As he walked away, Diego moved beside her. "You married him." "I did. But you don't love him." "No, then why? Because love's not what keeps people safe. Paper does, and names." Diego frowned. "That doesn't feel right." Isabel placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's not. But it's what we've got." That afternoon, she wrote her new name in the corner of the kitchen wall with a bit of chalk, Isabel Cordero Ortega. The children took turns tracing it with their fingers. Later, when she washed dishes in the tin basin outside, she heard footsteps behind her. "Ramona, you did it," the old woman said. "I did." Ramona handed her a folded cloth. Inside, dried orange peel, cinnamon bark, and 2 bay leaves. "For strength," she said. Isabel tucked it in her apron. "Do you think I'm wrong?" she asked. "No," Ramona said. "Just tired of being right." As dusk fell, the children gathered around the hearth. Luis and Leon argued about whether you could see the moon from a well. Ana tucked her doll into a shoebox lined with wool. Marisol hummed a song Isabel didn't recognize. Diego sat near the window watching shadows stretch across the hills. When Isabel walked past him, he asked quietly, "Is it over?" "No," she said. "But we bought ourselves a little time." He nodded, eyes never leaving the horizon. Out there, trouble still stirred. But inside, for now, they had a name, a house, and each other. And a door that stayed closed. There's always a price for safety. Sometimes it's your silence, sometimes it's your pride. The first letter came sealed in red wax and carried by a town boy who wouldn't meet Isabel's eyes. He handed it over like it might burn him, then took off down the road before she could say a word. Isabel stood on the porch, her hands stained with soap from scrubbing the twins' pants, and watched the dust rise behind his heels. She didn't need to open the letter to know who it was from. Only one man in Tierra Quemada used red wax for ordinary business, Mayor Julian Reyes. She cracked the seal and read the message once, then again, slower, each word coiled like wire. "We've been informed of your recent union. As per the terms of conditional guardianship under Article 12b, the new household arrangement will be subject to review. A representative will arrive within 14 days to inspect the premises and determine continued suitability for minor residents." The letter ended with a flourish that left no doubt. "You may think you've won something, but I'm still watching." She folded the paper and slid it into her apron. Marisol tugged at her skirt. "Was that a bad letter?" Isabel crouched. "It means we need to clean. A lot." The inspection wasn't the problem. The house was humble, but they kept it clean. The children were fed, clothed, cared for. What unsettled her was the quiet warning: "You are being measured." For the next week, they worked. She patched the worst of the roof with dried brush and old canvas. The twins gathered rocks to rebuild the front path. Diego fixed the back fence. Even Ana helped carry firewood with a solemn sense of duty. Each night, Isabel sat at the kitchen table long after the children were asleep, sorting through old deeds, prayer cards, and anything that could be used as proof of stability. She lit the last of their oil on the 7th night and wrote a letter to Padre Esteban, asking him to stand as a character witness. On the 9th day, Tomas returned. He didn't knock, just opened the gate and walked up like he had every right to be there, which now he did. He wore the same trail-dusted coat and a new expression, reserved, unreadable. "I have the documents," he said, holding up a worn folder. "Come inside." He didn't sit, just stood in the middle of the room while the children peeked around corners. "The title's updated. Your name's on the land now. Guardianship transfer forms here too, unsigned. Waiting on their approval." She took the folder, leafed through the pages. "You didn't have to come in person. I thought it best." "Why?" He hesitated. "Because the mayor's not just watching you, he's watching me." She closed the folder and looked up at him. "You mean because I'm a woman? Poor, unwed until 10 days ago." He didn't argue. "I'm used to being watched," she said. He glanced toward the hallway where Marisol sat cross-legged, stitching a button onto Diego's shirt. "Those kids depend on you." "I depend on them too," she said quietly. Tomas nodded. "There's more," he said. "Reyes has been stirring things up. Told the council you were manipulating the law. Said you only married me to cheat the system." "I did," she said bluntly. "I know. So does he." They stood in silence a moment, then Isabel asked, "Do you regret it?" "No," he said. "But you should be ready." "For what?" "For him to use whatever power he has to make you small." That night, Isabel didn't sleep much. The threat was no longer shadows in her mind. It had a face, a name, and a letterhead. She needed someone in her corner who couldn't be intimidated by politics or gossip. At dawn, she walked to Ramona's. The old woman was already tending to her chickens. Her gray hair was braided down her back, her eyes sharp as ever. "You want something," she said without turning. "I need you to be here when the inspector comes." Ramona wiped her hands and faced her. "Why? Because people listen when you speak." Ramona considered her. "You want me to lie? No. Just tell the truth, that I'm not feeding them dust and fear, that they're safe here. You think a man like Julian Rios cares what I think? If he doesn't, he'll have to pretend he does." Ramona gave a low laugh. "You've got teeth, girl. Took you long enough." 4 days later, the inspector arrived. He wore an official badge on his coat and a faint air of condescension, like he expected to find animal droppings in the corners and a wild-eyed woman in rags. Isabel greeted him in a clean dress, her hair braided, the children lined up behind her like soldiers. He walked the property, scribbling notes, tapped the walls with his knuckles, checked the pantry shelves, looked in every corner. "Where's your husband?" he asked. "He's a rancher," she said. "The land's signed over. The documents are here. I'm the one who raises the children. Still, he should be here. You want a man in the room or a parent?" He didn't answer. Ramona arrived at midday, stood by the garden fence like she owned it. When the inspector approached her, she said, "I've watched that woman take 5 broken children and give them back to themselves. If you want to punish someone for that, go ahead." The inspector made no comment. By late afternoon, he left. No promises, no conclusions, just silence. Isabel exhaled when the dust from his horse finally disappeared beyond the hill. Diego sat on the porch steps, arms across his knees. "Do you think it was enough?" "I don't know," she said. "But I didn't leave anything to chance." That night they didn't celebrate. But there was a calm to the house, a quiet that felt like breathing for the first time in days. Tomas stopped by again 2 days later. He brought a bag of flour and a coil of rope. "You didn't have to," she said. "I wanted to." He looked tired, dust in his hair, his boots scuffed from the trail, but his voice was steady. "Word is," the inspector reported favorably. She blinked. "Already he doesn't want to fight. Rios won't push it for now." Isabel felt something loosen in her chest. Not victory, just relief. "I can't thank you enough," she said. "I didn't do it for thanks." She met his eyes. Then why Tomas looked away for a long moment, then so softly she almost didn't hear it. He said, "Because I know what it means to lose someone you never got to keep." She didn't answer. There was nothing to say. Instead, she opened the door and let him in. You can build something good with your hands and still watch someone tear it down with a signature. The letter came 3 weeks after the inspector's visit, folded neatly and stamped with the official seal of Tierra Quemada. Isabel read it once, twice, then again, her breath tightening with each line. The words were dry, but they sank like stones in her chest. Guardianship granted provisionally for the duration of 1 year, subject to ongoing review. Property claim accepted under joint title contingent upon community stability and tax compliance. Additional reports will be filed quarterly. Any future infractions will be grounds for removal. It wasn't approval, it was probation. She stood on the porch, the paper limp in her hand, the wind tugging at her skirt. Marisol sat beside her peeling corn with slow, careful fingers. "Is it good news?" the girl asked. Isabel didn't answer right away. "It means we have a chance, but not peace." The children had done everything she'd asked. Diego had become quiet but dependable, watching the fence lines, helping with repairs. The twins were learning their letters from Anna, who read aloud each evening like it was her holy duty. Marisol, though still fragile, had begun to hum again when she worked. They'd built something fragile but real, a life made of routine and effort. But one wrong move, one petty complaint, and it would all be gone. That afternoon, she went into town to speak with Ramona, only to find her stoop empty and the shutters closed. A neighbor hunched over her broom said the old woman had gone to stay with a cousin near the border. Bad lungs, she explained. Too much dust this year. Isabel nodded, though it felt like the ground had shifted beneath her. Ramona had been their spine, the one voice in town that couldn't be swayed. She walked to the chapel instead, hoping for steadiness. Padre Esteban was sweeping the stone path, his back bent with weariness. They granted guardianship, she said. That's something. It's not enough. He rested his broom against the wall and looked at her. They're not used to things changing, especially not when it's a woman forcing it. Isabel folded her arms. Why does it take so little to break the rules, but so much to be accepted afterward? Because fear is easier than respect. They walked in silence around the side of the chapel where shade fell across the dry garden beds. The winter had been mild so far, but the soil still held no promise. You've made enemies, Isabel, the priest said finally. Not by doing wrong, but by doing right without asking permission. She turned to him. If they try to take the children again, they'll do it quietly next time. A petition, a court date, you never hear about an order sent by mail. She swallowed hard. Then I can't wait. I have to be louder than they are. He nodded once, a weary acceptance in his eyes. Then you'll need help. She went to Tomas. His ranch was quiet, the goats grazing near the fence line, the orchard bare. She found him mending a gate, one arm braced against the post, sweat darkening his collar. They're watching us, she said. I know. They'll find a reason, or invent one. He wiped his hands on a rag. So what are you thinking I need to work? I need steady income, something I can report log prove. You already run a house. That doesn't count. Not to them. He set down the hammer. There's a seed co-op in Estrella, 2 towns over. They need someone who can track shipments, check weights, run accounts. Would they hire someone like me? They might if I write the letter. She looked at him, then really looked. He was not a man built for speeches or soft reassurances, but he stood next to her now, not ahead of her, not behind. I didn't expect you to stay involved. I didn't expect to care, he admitted. But here we are. The ride to Estrella took half a day. She left the children with Padre Esteban, promising to return by sundown. The road was long and rutted, but her spine stayed straight in the saddle. Estrella was larger than Tierra Quemada, with adobe storefronts and long wooden sidewalks. She found the co-op tucked behind the rail yard, its walls painted with peeling blue letters and the smell of grain thick in the air. She met the manager, Senora Beltran, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, with salt and pepper hair and hands like stone. You're Tomas Ortega's wife, on paper. The woman didn't flinch. And in practice, we share a roof when needed. Not a bed. Beltran smirked. Best kind of arrangement. Isabel handed her the letter. Beltran read it slowly. You know weights and measures, yes. Can you keep books inventory? I was raised on it. My mother ran a fruit stall from a tin shack, and you have 5 mouths to feed 6, including mine. Beltran leaned back in her chair. We'll try you for 2 months. Start next week. No mistakes. I don't make them twice. Back home, the children greeted her like she'd returned from war. Ana jumped into her arms. Marisol clung to her skirt. Even Diego looked relieved. I got the job, she said. The twins whooped and ran around the yard. Isabel felt her ribs loosen just enough to let her breathe. That night, over a dinner of lentils and rice, Diego asked, will they still try to take us? Isabel stirred her spoon. Probably. But you're fighting every day. Marisol, half asleep, murmured, "Even in your dreams, especially then," Isabel whispered. When the house quieted, she stood at the window, watching shadows stretch across the fields. The letter from the mayor still sat folded in her apron pocket. The ink didn't scare her. What scared her was how easily good things could be undone. But she'd survived worse. And now she had something to protect. Some men don't care what's right. They just don't want a woman to get away with winning. The knock came on a Thursday, sharp and quick, the kind that didn't wait to be welcomed. Isabel wiped her hands on her apron and stepped onto the porch to find two men standing side by side. One was a deputy she recognized from town, thin, slow-moving, smelled of tobacco and smugness. The other was the mayor himself, Julian Rios. He wore a pale suit with brass buttons and a wide hat that shaded his narrow eyes. He looked like a man who'd never planted a seed or washed a plate, but spoke often of the land as if it bowed to him. "Señora Ortega," he said, smiling without warmth. "We have some business to discuss." "You could have written a letter," Isabel said. "I could have, but letters are easy to ignore." The children were inside. She could hear the clatter of the twins playing with stones and Anna's quiet singing from the back room. "What do you want?" she asked. He took a folded page from his coat and handed it over. "The council approved a road project. Your land runs right where we're expanding." She unfolded the paper. "You want to cut a road through my garden." "Progress is inconvenient," Rios said, "but it benefits everyone. It benefits you." He didn't argue. "Your guardianship agreement includes a clause about cooperation with territorial development. Denying access could be seen as non-compliance." Isabel stared at him. "So if I say no, you use it against me. It's not personal. It's only ever personal with you." The mayor's smile widened, but it didn't touch his eyes. "We begin surveys next week. I'd advise you not to interfere." She didn't say anything. Not until they left boots scraping across the dry yard, not until their horses disappeared down the path in a swirl of dust. Then she leaned against the doorframe, the paper clutched in her hand, heart thudding like a drum in her chest. Later that evening, she sat with Tomas on the porch. The sky was streaked orange and purple, and a warm wind moved through the sagebrush like breath. She handed him the paper. He read it in silence. "They want to run it through the middle of the field," she said, "where we plant beans, where the kids sleep under the stars in summer." "They think you won't fight," Tomas said, "or that if you do, you'll lose." "They're right. No," he said firmly. "They're betting on you being alone." Isabel looked at him, tired and sharp-eyed. "I don't want your pity. You don't have it." He folded the paper and set it on the railing. "You have two options: give in and hope they lose interest, or make it ugly for them. How make noise? Put them on record. Get the town talking." "I've already done that," she said bitterly. "Not like this." That night, Isabel wrote a letter to the council objecting to the road on the grounds of agriculture safety and family welfare. She included details of the children's routines, drawings from Ana, a statement from Padre Esteban. She sent it with Diego, who rode the mule into town before dawn. But the letter wasn't enough. 3 days later, 2 surveyors arrived without warning, staking the boundary in bright orange ribbon. Isabel stood between them and the garden with her arms folded, eyes like flint. "You have no right," she said. One of them shrugged. "We're following orders." She didn't move. They left. That evening, Diego came home with a split lip and his shirt torn at the collar. Tomas found him halfway down the trail, limping, face streaked with blood and dust. "Who?" Isabel asked. "The mayor's boy," Diego muttered. "Said I should tell you the road's coming, whether we like it or not." She pressed a cloth to his lip, trying not to tremble. Did you hit back? No. Why not? Because then he gets what he wants. She kissed his forehead. You did right. She walked out to the barn where Tomas was repairing the door latch. Her hands shook at her sides. They're trying to get to me through the kids. They've already tried law, he said. Now it's fear. What if I give in, she asked. Let them run the road. Maybe they'll leave us be. They won't, Tomas said flatly. Men like Rios don't stop when they get what they want. They stop when you stop them. That night, Isabel couldn't sleep. She sat on the porch long after the fire died, wrapped in her shawl, the sky full of stars that didn't feel like comfort. She thought about the garden, the fence Diego had built, the twins' rock path, the place Ana buried her broken doll last spring. She thought about all of it being paved under. At dawn, she walked the property line with a stick of white chalk marking every post and stone. Then she walked to the chapel and asked Padre Esteban to witness a declaration. She declared the land a sanctuary under Article 11 of the Territorial Code, an obscure clause allowing temporary protection for land used for community education or child welfare. Are you sure? Esteban asked. No, she said. But if I don't try, what am I teaching them? The next morning, she nailed the declaration to the gate. A copy was sent to the mayor's office, another to the regional land council. By midweek, the mayor's assistant returned. This is bold, he said, holding up the copy. It's also untested. Then it's time someone tested it. He eyed her. They'll come harder now. Let them, she said. I've got ink, I've got nails, and I've got 5 reasons not to back down. That evening, Marisol brought her a drawing, 6 figures standing in front of a garden, each holding a tool. One of them was Isabel. Behind them, the road had stopped. Will it work? The girl asked. Isabel didn't lie. I don't know, but we're still here. She nodded. We're still here. Outside, the wind picked up scattering dust and seeds across the hard ground. But the fence held. The chalk lines held. And inside, 5 children slept, knowing someone had said no. A mother isn't born through blood or law. She's born the first time a child reaches for her in fear, and she stays. The storm rolled in at dusk, black and fast across the mesa. Isabel saw it coming from the hilltop as she hung sheets on the line, the sky swallowing sunlight in thick strokes. The air turned heavy still, like the land was bracing itself. She hurried back toward the house, skirts hitched, the first drops hitting like stones. Thunder cracked above the distant ridge. The children were inside, Ana clutching her doll beneath the table, Marisol closing the shutters. Diego paced at the front door. It's coming fast, he said, voice low. She nodded. Get the lanterns lit. Bring the goats in if you can. He was out the door before she finished the sentence. The wind hit not long after, violent and sharp, tearing the clothesline loose, slamming the barn doors open. Rain poured sideways. Isabel secured the last shutter with both hands, fingers scraped raw on the wood. She counted the children, her mind racing, even as she moved. Luis, Leon, Ana, Marisol, Diego, the baby goat bleated outside. Where's Diego? She asked. Luis looked up from where he and Leon were stuffing rags beneath the window. He went to get the animals, alone. The wind shrieked across the yard, ripping the latch from the chicken coop. Isabel shoved her feet into boots and threw on her coat. Stay here, she ordered. Don't open the door unless it's me. The storm met her like a wall. Rain hit sideways. Lightning flashed above the orchard, white and sudden. She stumbled across the yard, mud sucking at her boots, calling Diego's name into the wind. She found him near the barn, soaked to the bone, dragging a tarp over the smallest goat. We have to go, she shouted, grabbing his arm. I almost had it. We can't lose you too. He looked at her, then defiance and fear twisted in his face. I wasn't going to leave it out here. I know, she said, pulling him close, shielding him with her body, as another bolt cracked overhead. But I can't lose you, Diego. I won't survive it. They ran together, shoulders bent against the rain, the animal bawling behind them. Isabel half-carried Diego across the flooded yard and into the barn where they slammed the doors and dropped to their knees, breathing like they'd run a mile uphill. The wind howled around them. Water seeped through the cracks. But they were inside. Alive. You scared me, she said, voice shaking. I thought I could do it on my own. You're 12. I'm the oldest. She reached out, touched the back of his head where his hair was plastered down. You don't have to be the strongest all the time. I do when it's my fault we're here. She pulled back. What do you mean if we hadn't gone to the market? If I hadn't told the man about you helping us, maybe no one would have known. Maybe they wouldn't have come after us. Her heart twisted. Diego, it's my fault you had to marry him, that the mayor hates you. No, her voice was firm now. That's not your burden. None of this started with you. I should have stayed quiet. Then I'd never have known you, and neither would Tomas. And you'd still be sleeping in a boxcar and pretending not to cry at night. He dropped his eyes. She touched his cheek. You didn't make this storm, but you helped me stand through it. He nodded, small and stiff. They waited out the worst of it in the barn, huddled beneath blankets pulled from the tack room. When the wind finally died and the sky cleared just enough to show stars, they returned to the house together, soaked, silent, and tired. Inside, the fire had gone out, but the others were safe, curled on the floor in a pile of quilts. Leon snored softly. Anna had her thumb in her mouth. Isabel stared at them all, chest aching. Tomas arrived at dawn, his coat dripping and his face drawn. I heard the barn doors slammed open. Figured you'd need a hand. We weathered it, she said. He stepped inside, took in the wet boots by the door, the muddy prints, the shivering goat in the corner. You're tougher than you look. She gave him a tired smile. Don't say that to a woman who's just dragged a goat through a storm. He grinned, just a flicker, then turned serious. Any damage, fence is half down. Gardens flooded, a few roof tiles missing. I'll stay the day. She didn't argue. They worked together in silence, mending the fence, hauling away debris. Isabel's shoulders ached. Her legs shook, but her hands kept moving. The storm had torn the land raw, but it hadn't taken the roots. By mid-afternoon, Diego came outside and stood near the well watching them. He hadn't said much since the barn. Tomas waved him over. Grab the hammer, he said. You've got steady hands. Diego obeyed without a word, kneeling beside Tomas to help brace the next post. They worked in rhythm, silent but coordinated. Isabel watched from the porch, a strange warmth rising through her ribs. Later, when the sun dipped low, Tomas set down his tools and joined her on the steps. You and that boy, he said, nodding toward Diego. You've got something I never had. What's that someone to come back for? She looked at him. You don't need to be alone, you know. I'm not, he said, and that was the end of it. That night, as Isabel tucked Anna into bed, the little girl looked up and whispered, You're not really my mama, right? Isabel paused. No, not by birth. But can I still call you that? Her throat tightened, if you want to. Anna nodded once and closed her eyes. Later, when Isabel lay awake on the floor beside the hearth, she felt Diego shift closer in his blanket. Then a quiet whisper. You're the only mother I've ever known. Isabel didn't speak. She just reached out and took his hand, held it until sleep claimed them both. There are men who only want to win, and when they can't, they'll burn down everything just to watch you lose. It happened on a Tuesday, quiet and clear, with no warning in the sky. Tomas had gone back to the ranch early that morning. Isabel was walking back from the well, her hands raw from scrubbing the sheets when she caught the scent. Not smoke from the hearth, but something bitter wrong. She dropped the bucket. The first thing she saw was the chicken coop smoke, curling from the roof like a warning ribbon. Then the flames low and fast, licking through the back corner of the barn. The grass around it was already catching dry from the storm winds that had battered the land days before. She ran, screamed for Diego, yelled for the twins. The children came pouring from the house, barefoot and blinking, Ana crying, Marisol clutching her doll. Water buckets, she shouted, her voice sharp, cracked with panic. Get the goats out, Luis Leon, now! They moved on instinct. Diego hauled a pail to the trough. Isabel grabbed another, dousing the fence where the flames had started to climb. Her arms burned, her lungs stung, but she didn't stop. Neighbors came running. Old Martin from across the Arroyo, Estela from up near the Orchard Road. They didn't ask questions, they joined in. Buckets, shovels, boots, stamping on dry grass. Padre Esteban arrived red-faced and out of breath, helping drag the soaked tarps from the shed. It took nearly an hour. By the time the last embers hissed out, the barn roof had collapsed inward. The coop was a blackened husk. One of the goats had escaped through the broken fence, the others trembled in the corner of the yard. The garden was scorched along the edge where someone had lit a trail of oil straight to the stalks. Isabel stood there, wet and shaking her arms coated in ash. That was no accident, Estela said, pointing to the charred oil can discarded by the fence. That was placed. Padre Esteban looked sick. You think it was him? Isabel didn't have to ask who he meant. She nodded, jaw clenched. Who else would set a fire on a windless day, right after I invoked land protection? They all went quiet. The children stood in a tight cluster near the porch, wide-eyed. Ana held onto Isabel's shawl like it was the only stable thing left. Marisol's cheeks were streaked with soot and tears. They tried to trap us in the barn, Diego said, voice flat. If it started at night. Isabel reached for him, but it didn't. Later, after the neighbors left and the children were washed and fed as best they could be, she sat on the porch steps with Tomas, who had ridden back at full gallop when he saw the smoke from the ridge. You were right, she said. They don't stop. They won't. She looked up. So what do we do now? We go to the sheriff. He's on the mayor's payroll. Then we go above him. Who? The territorial office? Estrella or beyond. We bypass the cowards here and make it official. She shook her head. We don't have money for a legal fight. I do. She stared at him. I sold one of the wagons, the big one I never use. Got enough to hire someone to file in your name. Maybe even get a land protector out here. Her voice was small. Why would you do that? He met her eyes. Because I didn't marry you to watch you be burned out. Something inside her folded then, like a letter sealed too long. She felt tired to the bone, but she didn't look away. I can't promise we'll win. I don't need a promise, he said. Just someone who doesn't run. That night, Diego sat beside her on the porch, long after the others had gone to sleep. His face was lit by the dim lantern glow. I used to think everything bad happened for a reason, he said. That maybe we were being punished. Do you still believe that number? He shook his head. I think some people just don't want to see us make it. She wrapped her arm around his shoulders, pulling him close. Then we make it louder, she said. And we make it impossible to look away. 3 days later, they rode to Estrella together, Isabel, Tomas, and Diego. She wore her cleanest dress hair, braided tight. Diego carried the folder of documents. Tomas rode silent beside them, jaw set like stone. The territorial office was small, crowded, and full of dust. A woman at the desk squinted at the declaration of land protection, then at Isabel. "You live in Tierra Quemada?" she asked. "Yes." "You're the one that filed sanctuary status for children's welfare?" "Yes." The woman leaned back in her chair. "We've had some chatter about that file. Made its way to the capital." "Is that good?" "Depends who you ask," the clerk said. "You're either a nuisance or a pioneer." Isabel held her gaze. "I'm a mother. They left with stamped copies, a hearing date, and a name of a lawyer who might help file a grievance." On the ride home, the wind was sharp but not unfriendly. Tomas said little but offered Isabel the blanket from his saddle. She didn't refuse it. Back in Tierra Quemada, smoke no longer clung to the yard, but the black scars on the barn frame remained. The land bore the memory, and so did she. Later that evening, Anna handed her a folded note, careful and smudged. Inside was a drawing of the house surrounded by stick-figure people. In the middle was Isabel holding a hammer in one hand and a baby goat in the other. A fire burned behind her, but she stood smiling. Underneath, in uneven letters, was one word, Mama. She sat down on the porch step, the note trembling in her hands. She wasn't done. She hadn't lost. And she wouldn't let anyone take what they had built, not with fire, not with threats, not even with signatures. Some people fight with fists, others with fire, but the worst ones smile while they're writing your name into the dirt. The letter came in a cream-colored envelope with gold trim. It was handed to Isabel by a courier in a fine coat and polished boots, who didn't look like he'd ever ridden through mud. No stamp from Tierra Quemada, no seal from the mayor's office. It was from the capital. Isabel opened it on the porch with Diego beside her, still dusty from the field. Her hands didn't shake, but her chest felt tight. Territorial Review Board, Notice of Hearing. Guardianship of Minor Dependents under Article 12b and Land Status Contestation under Clause 8 filed on behalf of Municipal Authority, Tierra Quemada. She stared at the next lines, Complainant Mayor Julian Rios. Allegation fraudulent claim of sanctuary status, unlawful guardianship, and obstruction of civic development. Diego leaned over. What does it mean? It means he's trying to finish what the fire couldn't. Isabel didn't cry. She read the letter again, lips moving without sound. Then she folded it once, sharp and clean, and tucked it into her pocket. She stood and walked to the barn where Tomas was checking the roof they'd begun to rebuild with salvaged beams. He turned when he saw her wiping his hands on a rag. "Let me guess," he said. "It's not good." "It's war," she said. He took the letter, read it slowly. "He's accusing you of lying about everything. Guardianship, land, sanctuary, all of it." Tomas didn't look surprised. He wants the road. He wants the power. And he wants you gone. She crossed her arms. "What if we don't go to the hearing? What if we ignore it? Then he gets everything by default." Isabel nodded. "Then I guess we go." That evening she met with Padre Esteban in the chapel. The pews creaked beneath her. The windows let in slanted orange light. He listened quietly as she read the letter aloud, then set it on the altar like something too heavy to carry. "Will you speak for us?" she asked. "I already have," he said, "but I'll do it again, in front of anyone who'll listen. You've done so much." "So have you," he said. "But Isabel, understand this. Rios doesn't need to prove you're unfit. He just needs to prove you're unfamiliar, unusual, unwelcome." Isabel's hands balled into fists in her lap. "Then I'll show them what home looks like. On the morning of the hearing, Isabel dressed in her plainest dress. No ruffles, no jewelry, just linen clean and pressed. She tied her hair back, packed a satchel with documents, drawings from the children, the sanctuary notice, and the deed. Diego insisted on coming. If they ask questions, they should see my face, he said. I'm not ashamed. Neither were the others. Marisol gave Isabel her doll for luck. The twins packed her a small pouch of dried beans from the scorched garden. Ana kissed her cheek and said, "Don't let them take our names." At the courthouse in Estrella, the hearing room smelled of dust and ink. Rows of chairs lined the walls. At the front, a tribunal of 3 officials, 2 men and a woman, sat behind a wide table. Their faces were unreadable. On the opposite side of the room sat Mayor Rios, his gray suit, immaculate, one leg crossed over the other. His eyes met Isabel's with a flicker of amusement, as if he already saw the ending. The lead official spoke first. "Señora Isabel Ortega, this hearing regards the status of your guardianship and the legitimacy of your sanctuary claim. You may speak freely, but all testimony is recorded and subject to legal consequence." Isabel stood. Her voice, when it came, was clear. "I did not ask for those children. I did not plan for them. But when I found them, I did not walk away. I fed them. I cleaned their wounds. I taught them to read and to rest and to hope again. If that makes me unlawful, then the law is broken, not me." One of the officials leaned forward. "Did you marry Tomas Ortega solely to gain legal rights?" "Yes." Gasps fluttered through the room. "But I stayed because I chose to," she added. "We built something together. It wasn't for love in the beginning, but it is now in the only way that matters. Quiet, steady, useful." The woman on the panel looked down at her notes. "You invoked Sanctuary Clause 11 without precedent. Do you understand that that clause has never been applied to domestic households? I understand that children need protection more than paperwork. I used what law I had. They called Rios to the front. He walked slowly, confidently, like a man posing for a painting. These accusations are not personal, he began, but rules must be followed. The sanctity of land ownership must be upheld. We cannot allow emotion to dictate legal order." And yet Tomas muttered from the bench beside Isabel, "You tried to burn her out like a thief in the night." When Rios finished, the room fell silent. Then Diego stood. He hadn't been called, but he walked forward anyway, head high. "I was 9 when my parents died," he said. "We lived in the East Rail Camp. No one came for us. Not the mayor, not the church, not the council. We stole food. We slept in the cold. When we came to Tierra Quemada, I thought we'd die there too." He looked at Isabel. "But she gave us beds, not because she had to, because we were breathing." The panel let him speak. "She made us brush our teeth. She made us pray. She made us show up for each other. And she never let anyone call us orphans again. She made us hers." He turned back to the officials. "You want to take us away because she didn't do it the right way, because she's poor, because she's a woman, then just say that. But don't pretend you're protecting anyone." He sat down. The room was still. That night, Isabel returned home exhausted, unsure, and quiet. Tomas poured her a cup of water by the fire. "I've never seen you like that," he said. "Like what? Unshakable?" "I wasn't," she admitted. "I was terrified." He took her hand, rough and warm. "Then you hid it well." She smiled. Maybe that's what mothers do. Outside, the land lay dark but peaceful. The embers in the fire crackled. The children slept under one roof. Their names still theirs. Their home still theirs for now. They never meant to give us a future. But we made one anyway with scraped hands and names no one could take. The letter came on a morning so quiet, Isabel almost missed the sound of the mule arriving. It was Diego who saw it first, squinting through the window as the courier approached. She opened the door before he could knock. "No signature needed," he said, handing her the thick envelope. "Official seal." The words Territorial Review Board were stamped in red across the back. She didn't open it right away. She stood on the porch with it clutched in both hands, staring out across the fields, where the frost still clung to the edges of the garden. The barn, half rebuilt, stood strong again. Boards sanded clean, the new roof catching the morning sun. Smoke curled from the chimney. Inside, 5 children waited. Tomas joined her after a moment, resting one hand on the post beside her. "Good or bad," he said, "you're not reading it alone." She broke the seal. The pages were short, clean, formal. Guardianship of minors listed under care of Isabel Ortega is confirmed and made permanent. Sanctuary status approved under Clause 11, reclassified as Historical Protection Site for Educational Development. Land title upheld. She read it again. Then once more. "They granted it," she said. Tomas didn't speak, just smiled wide and crooked and warm. Inside, Diego looked up from the hearth, reading the answer in Isabel's face before she spoke. He whooped so loud Anna nearly fell off her stool. "They said yes," she asked, eyes big. "They said yes," Isabel whispered. The twins whooped louder than Diego. Marisol clapped her hands. Anna reached for Isabel, who scooped her up and held her tight. No one made breakfast. They ate bread and honey with their fingers dancing through the house, tracking in dirt and laughter. Later that morning, the townspeople came. First was Estela with a basket of tamales and sweet tea. Then Martín with 2 fresh-plucked chickens. Padre Esteban arrived with a loaf of cornbread and a letter of congratulations signed by 5 neighbors. "Some of us knew," he said quietly, "but we waited. Not out of doubt, just hope." They ate in the yard, spread out on blankets and benches, the sun warming their backs. Someone brought a fiddle, someone else a guitar. Tomas sang softly when no one was paying attention. That afternoon, the mail brought another envelope, this one thinner plain. It was from Julian Rios. A single sheet. No greeting. "Congratulations. The board has chosen emotion over order. I hope the road through your land proves useful for someone someday." Isabel read it once, then fed it to the fire without a word. They never heard from him again. That night, after the children were asleep and the guests had gone, Isabel stood barefoot in the yard, listening to the silence. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of soundless laughter, of warmth still echoing from the afternoon, of names whispered in prayers that finally felt answered. Tomas stepped behind her, arms folded across his chest. "You didn't just win," he said. "You built something worth keeping." "It never felt like winning," she said. "Maybe that's why it lasted." The land remained hard. The work never eased. But there was rhythm now. Steadiness. The goats grew fat. The garden returned. Diego helped lay irrigation lines from the spring. The twins started carving birds out of wood scraps. Marisol learned to sew crooked stitches into straight seams. Anna began writing her own name on every surface she could reach. In spring, the town named Isabel to the school board. Estela called her Madre del Valle, half joking. The name stuck. In summer, Tomas asked her to renew their vows. She said yes, not for legal need, but for something deeper. They planted a fig tree behind the barn and placed a stone at its base with all 6 names carved into it, hers, his, and the 5 children's. A future rooted. One morning in early fall, Isabel sat on the porch steps watching the sun rise over the ridge. The valley spread out below, golden and dry and alive. Diego stepped outside with 2 mugs of coffee. He handed her one, then sat beside her. "Cold today," he said. She nodded. He didn't speak for a while. Then, "Do you ever think about before the train, the station?" "Sometimes," she said, "but I try not to live there." He sipped his coffee. "Me too." She looked at him, taller now, shoulders broadening, eyes older than they should have been, but clear. "You turned out all right," she said. He smiled. "So did you." The wind moved through the fig tree behind them. Somewhere out near the barn, one of the twins was singing. Isabel leaned her shoulder against Diego's and closed her eyes. They'd made it. Not by running, not by winning in the way men like Rios counted wins, but by staying holding building, by refusing to let anyone write them out. The land had tried to shake them off. The law had bent against them. Fire, silence, shame, none of it had worked. They still stood. That was the story now, and no one could take it from them. The educational lesson learned from this story is that family isn't always born. It's chosen, built day by day through love, patience, and quiet courage. Sometimes the law or the world won't recognize what you've made, but that doesn't make it any less real or worth defending. When you stand firm in what's right, even in small, everyday ways, you leave behind more than a name, you leave roots. For those who've weathered life's long storms, it's a reminder that your strength isn't in what you've endured, but in what you've protected.